welcome everybody. Welcome to our guests of honors, and I hope you had a great day. It's Wednesday, and I always say in just to motivate myself as the week goes because Monday we are all like, oh, it's Monday. Let's do this. Tuesday we get with the rhythm and the beat of the week. Wednesday we are just like, you know what, I got this. I can do this. We are almost there. So um, I want you to take this as a Wellness Wednesday, as a day where you are going to allow yourself to unlearn, relearn, and also have some take homes that you can implement. So we are going to start with our program. I'm feeling a bit under the weather, so please bear with me. But definitely, this is going to be a fire filled session. So yeah, we're going to welcome Renee as the visionary and founder of Master Seed, just to give us a brief of why are we here and why are we gathering in such powerful and critical topic, and which is mental health awareness in the day and age that we live in. These are critical conversations, important conversations we ought to be having regularly. So I'm going to hand over to Renee Matsepe, and yes, you're welcome, ma'am.
Good day, good evening, everyone. Yeah, we're dealing with different time zones, and it becomes tricky. Thank you all for joining, and I hope we're gonna have a very fruitful session. So basically, we are living in very difficult times, and really, we felt as a team that mental health is the peak of your entire being. And it's so important for you as an individual to know how to self-care. We talk mental health all the time. However, there are no tools that are actually provided to navigate your everyday life, especially in difficult situations like family. There's always family drama, and sometimes it affects us more than we'd like. And even though it doesn't, it might be a bit far from you, but the fact that there isn't wellness within that space can affect you in various forms and ways. So we wanted to kind of support the students firstly because they are our direct beneficiary. We also support unemployed youth. And we know the process of job seeking. Personally, I know how stressful it is. I've been unemployed myself for an entire year, applying for positions and not getting anything. So I know how strenuous it is. I know how costly it is to even apply for employment. I mean, you need data, you need to print, you need to go for interviews. I mean, the journey is really stressful. And, people always talk around it as though it's something very easy for you to do. And it can definitely affect your mental health. And we also know how toxic work environments can get. And we thought, you know what, we need to talk around issues of wellness in a well-rounded manner and be able to provide support to each and every person out there. And mental health, I feel like, is the core thing, and self-awareness is a frustrating process itself. So while you navigate around finding yourself, developing yourself, it can get very strenuous. It can affect your mental health so much. The acceptance, development, there's just a lot. The judgments, because while you are still developing, there'll be people that feel like you should be this or you should be that. And then there's also general norms that people feel like you should follow and all of that stuff. So we felt like, let's bring in experts, let's bring in people that have gone through those difficult times to talk around the issue and also provide support to one another and to external people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Renee. I think now we know why we are here and why it is critical that we are having this important conversations. And in a day and time that we are living in, we have come to the realization that sometimes um, we cannot always ignore these things, and we have to create platforms of us speaking about these issues, us educating ourselves, deliberately learning and being intentional about understanding. There is a saying that I love. It says, make a practice of stopping every so often to simply be present, to be present to what you see, be present to what you smell, who is with you, and how this moment feels physically and emotionally. Because we are in a busy world, you can move from one event to the other, you can move from one course to another. You can move from one workplace to the other, and you might be feeling like, I'm on the move and I have everything going on. But when you do not prioritize time to stop and be present, how are you feeling? What is the environment feeling like? How is the environment affecting you in the situation or circumstance that you find yourself in? What are the emotions that you're experiencing? Have you recently found yourself in a transitioning moment? Is there uncertainties around you? How are you feeling and how are you dealing with it? So sometimes you just have to pause, assess your surroundings so that you are able to take control of your mental health. I am not the speaker of the day today. I'm just a host. So I am going to give over to my Leonard friend, and a beautiful Marelie Botha from Inside Consulting. And she's just going to give us more insight into what really mental health is. Over to you, Marelie.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Welcome. I think between the two of you, you've highlighted the importance of mental health and why we are here today. I think those that have been in sessions with me previously, and I'm certain this is most of you have not. I enjoy a quite interactive session. Okay, so I'm going to start off with mental health as a general perspective, from a general perspective. So let's just quickly check out the presentation itself. Okay, rather start with background. So my name is Marelie. I am from Insight Consulting. So I consult on a daily basis. This is in the psychometric employee wellness atmosphere. So we assess employees based on their cognitive functioning, emotional wellness, psychological wellness, and then capabilities. So check where the employee is right now, and where they need to be in order for them to perform optimally. So what can we do? What strategies can we put in place to ensure that that gap is met and that it's in line with the organization's values, strategy, and that there's some form of return on investment? Not some form. We're looking for optimal form on return on investments, obviously. But we are employee behavioral specialists. The Insight team, you'll see now and then, if you continue, working with us, you'll notice that there are various team members. We have two partners, so it's myself and my business partner, and then there are random practitioners that freelance for us or that we onboard for certain projects. You'll notice that Liane is also in the chat today, in the meeting today, which is one of the practitioners that we use for this project with Mustard Seed. Okay, and on the agenda for today, before we start, we're going to look at some background information. And this is a very nice course for students, for adults, for employees to utilize. It's called The Science of Wellbeing. This is a course set through Yale University. So let's just, let me click on it and I can show you. Okay, cool. Okay, excellent. So you can literally just type into Google science of well-being. And it's going to take you to a journal page like this. And so it says the science of well-being. It looks a little bit confusing. It's not. There's going to be a option here. We can log in or sign on. And then you're going to go back to the same screen that you see right here. At the top, you're going to go to course. And this is a 10-week course that I suggest in order to optimize your mental health, to understand the psychological and emotional reactions and the behavioral consequences or challenges that accompany those reactions. This is an excellent course that I thoroughly enjoyed. This is practical activities along with short videos of actual classroom education, things that I learned in university. And it's short, it's very interactive, quick to the point, and you have activities that you do practically for 10 weeks every day. It is not cognitively straining. It's not too challenging, and it's used in simple language. So these are types of courses that they actually recommend to master's students at university to gain self-awareness. So yeah, that's one practical tool that I recommend in order to receive background information on psychology and psychological well-being. And then for the students itself, if we look at learning and your environment, just zoom out here. If we're looking at learning and your environment, there are various sensory needs that you pick up in your environment. So the way that we learn in our environment is through various sensory needs, right? It's sensory inputs. So looking at the way that you observe or pick up on information through your sight. So typically, like we're doing right now, you can see visual presentation. That is a visual form of stimulation. Then we look at aspects like listening, audio. So you can actually hear me talk, and that's a way of you gathering your information. And again, with touch and for instance, a lot of people enjoy learning practically. So practically being busy, moving, touching, smell, those type of things are all of your sensory inputs that's gathering this information. And then it sends signals to your brain, right? Your brain captures that information. And for instance, let's take this can, right? It's an energy drink. So I know when I taste this, there is some form of liquid in my mouth. That is the sensory input. I can feel it in my mouth. And then your brain goes, oh, wait, I've experienced this before. I know what this tastes like, right? And that is your brain locating your memory, the memory in your brain, saying that, okay, somewhere information on this can has been stored before. And then I realized, oh, wait, this has a tropical taste with a little bit of bitter. So there must be caffeine in this. Oh, wait, this amount of caffeine gave me, my reaction to it was my heart was beating faster the previous time. So maybe my adaptive response would be putting this down and rather taking a glass of water. And that's what your brain does with absolutely everything that is introduced to you. So when new information is introduced, we have a behavioral reaction to it based on our previous responses. Cool. So that's what our brain does with information. So sometimes when we are very anxious or we have this negative experience, our sensory sensitivity can increase or decrease. So sometimes I might want to eat more or eat less based on the environment that I'm experiencing. And what this does is it's because your brain doesn't release certain chemicals because it's either so overwhelmed that it can't release those chemicals, and then we increase other things around us in order to enjoy life basically more or enjoy the activity that we're engaging in. So sometimes we're so overwhelmed that we just need to sleep. sometimes we're so overwhelmed that we are eating more. And that is normal to feel because, and we'll go into psychological set points a little bit later on. But sometimes our needs aren't entirely met. And this is typically what occurs in a learning environment. When we are at school or at varsity or even as an employee, sometimes our needs aren't necessarily met. So, for instance, somebody that needs to move a lot at school, they're quite, active, and they suddenly go into a working environment where they are constantly at their desk and they're not moving. This can be quite challenging and can influence the employee's productivity. Or you don't understand why all of a sudden you're not performing at work. And it might just be that your sensory needs aren't met. So the strategies that we put in place is something like if we're looking at movement activities, so somebody that needs a lot more stimulation in terms of movement, we're looking at typical stretching exercises now and then in between, but sometimes that isn't always possible, right? So the typical stuff that tips and tricks that are introduced online isn't necessarily working for you. Little things such as putting your legs up onto the chair and putting it back down, or putting it onto a little stool in front of you and putting it back down. Those are sensory movements that can actually increase your Cool. Thank you. So that can increase your just basic little micro behaviors that contribute to your performance. If we're looking at visual strategies, if you are somebody that, for instance, again, in a working environment or even at school, you might not have the privilege of having a colorful office, or you're in a cubicle and you don't have that option. But look at color schemes, for instance. If you're a person that has a need for visual stimulation, you like seeing stuff that are pretty, you get information easier into your brain using pictures, or you're a creative person. Looking at color schemes that match each other on your desk, or even having lighter blue colors and darker blue colors with each other. You can even see on the screen here darker greens with lighter greens, and that tends to increase again that stimulation from your environment. And these aren't active strategies that you put in place that you need to work on constantly. It is stuff that you can put in place at the beginning, and it just naturally stimulates your environment. If we're looking at auditory strategies, little things like having white noise in your office or at home. Again, not always possible if you're sharing an office. You can substitute that for headphones or even noise cancelling headphones. You can increase little things like taking a 5-minute break and completely just putting your headphones on, listening to a song or two that's going to put you into that relaxing mode again. Touch strategies. Touch does not mean that I need to, constantly touch my colleague in order to actually work, but it rather looks at the materials around you. So having, softer, like a blanket over your legs, or a cushion that you sit on that has that soft stimulation, or if you need a lot more of a smoother desk in order for you to function properly. We don't realize how much of the sensory inputs are actually needed for us to stay engaged in our environment. Taste and smell, again, having certain snacks. So you might struggle with your child eating bigger meals, but this child might perform better if it's constant snacking. And I'm not encouraging you to remove those meals, but maybe look at what works for them in terms of learning, being stimulated from the environment. So having small snacks like biltong or apple, cheeses, smaller snacks that they can constantly get an intake, but not over intake the amount of food that they're putting in. And surprisingly, this is one of the strategies that works very well with children, in order for them to remain get that nutritious value in still. And then again, going to smell, this might be just to have, your candle. You can literally just light a candle and then blow it out again. That increase in certain, also not going to go into details, but there are certain chemical releases from your body that allows you to relax when there are pleasant smells in your environment. Okay, so this is the fun part. This is what I actually love doing, is psychological well-being, right? So in your psychological well-being, you have your physical well-being. This is where you need to be active. People look at how much rest you get in, how much activities you're exposed to, all of those type of things. Then you have your social environment. This is your relationships that we foster in order to remain, well and happy. And then you have your psychological well-being. Now, this is where happiness and meaning in life lies. So typically you can have your physical well-being is there, awesome, great. You have your friends and family that's interacting with you, but you're still feeling very low. And it might be because the work that you're engaging in is not fulfilling. It's not making you happy. Or it's making you happy to some degree, but there isn't enough engagement there to keep you satisfied on the longer term. Okay, your psychological well-being, again, we're looking at happiness and meaning in life, has a certain set point, right? And when there are challenges in our environment, or there's suddenly a traumatic event that takes place, your set point is probably here. This is your normal set point. And then something happens and we either fall into a very low dip or a moderate dip or a small dip, right? But after that event takes place, we have to go back to, or we naturally go back to a set point. And this might take, in some instances, it might be very quick. It might take a lot longer. It might take very long. And that's where the challenge lies, in ensuring that we stay fit in our mental health to get ourselves back to that certain set point. Sometimes when we experience a very high, we have, for instance, we go out for the first time in 2 weeks. We experience a very high, right? We're feeling very great. That was a wonderful weekend. And then suddenly on Monday, going back to work, we're very depressed. Abnormally, this is not my normal self. And that's okay, actually, because it is quite normal. You just experienced a very high. It's okay if you fall a little bit. Allow your body to adjust again. Allow your mental health to go back to that normal state. So don't be too hard on yourself when you can't immediately get back into the swing of things, because your body was just out of a normal event. Okay, so that's well-being. If you, just for the sake of time, we can come back to me if there's more questions on this. There is still a lot to discuss on the POMO model itself, but focuses on 5 elements. And I love it because it integrates well-being, it integrates your happiness and your meaning in life. And if you go to that course that I suggested in the beginning, it explains each and every component well. And you go through a 10-week course of practicing, practically practicing this in your everyday life to ensure that you have those coping skills exercised and it comes naturally. So we're looking at positive emotions. Those are typically things that introducing affirmations every day into your everyday life. If you're looking at engagement, how do we keep ourselves engaged in the environment that we're at? And those, again, we're looking at some of your sensory needs there. Relationships, how do we form and network new relationships while maintaining your current relationships? What relationships are more meaningful, and what relationships do we just need in the here and now to learn and develop in that moment in time? And when is it needed to step out of that environment? We're looking at meaning in life. What do you actually enjoy? What fulfills you? how do we look at the self and what is unique to you that you are going to contribute into your working environment, and ensuring that there's meaning and fulfillment in your everyday life. And then accomplishments. This is something that we neglect, is celebrating the small things in life, emphasizing little things that something simple as let's take learners for instance. Your child has, and I'm going to go into the sporting environment, not necessarily academics, but your child couldn't hit a goal or score that goal or whatever for 3 games in a row. And for the first time, even though the team lost by far, but your child scored that goal, that is something to celebrate, because that child struggled for the previous 3 times making that goal. And it's important to celebrate those small victories. Okay, and we can go on to Q&A a little bit later on.
Thank you very much, Marelie. That was so insightful. I like it when you touched on the PEMA model where, in our generation these days, we are always on a rush of not understanding what really is happening in one's life, understanding your emotions, the meaning of life, what does life mean to you. We just get on into this world and we are doing everything that everybody's doing and there is no meaning. And even with achieving accomplishments, we get one thing after the other and we do not make a moment to pause and say, actually, I made it this far because I invested the time and the energy in this. So
Yeah.
it's very, very important. I like it when you also explaining on the high mood that we are always on, positive energy, getting this and this, and we forget to say that it is not always summer throughout the year. We
Exactly.
get seasons like winter where things are quite a bit low and you are not feeling yourself, you are not understanding the emotion. I've seen people who I would ask, "How are you doing?" And they were like, I'm not, I'm okay, but I'm not so okay, but I don't know what it is." That is the low moment that I believe you're talking about to say you are experiencing this low, and it's not so wrong. Sometimes it's for you to stay there, understand it, and be kind to yourself while you are feeling so low.
Exactly.
This Tandy, we are now ready to learn and engage with you on this topic that you will be talking to us about. She is an emotional intelligence specialist, a clinical psychologist by profession. Welcome, Sis Tandy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, we can hear you.
Cool. Right. Right. Okay. Good evening to everybody, and thanks for the lovely preceding talks. And I think you've, between yourself and Marelie, is it Marelie, right?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think you've touched on a lot of points that I had planned to explore. Nevertheless, we'll go through the presentation and allow for some questions. Okay, so let's look at what mental health is. And I've taken, I'm using the definition, um, which is used by the World Health Organization, who, and essentially we refer to this as the 4D well-being, and the 4 critical factors in terms of mental health. The first factor is that mental health is inclusive of your basic cognitive and social skills. So sometimes when people are saying, I've got mental health challenges, it could be that it's around cognition, or maybe just they're struggling socially. to interact socially, or to just navigate the social terrain. And then the second ingredient is the ability to recognize, express, and modulate one's emotions, as well as the ability to empathize with others. So basically, just our ability to identify emotions within ourselves, understand what the meaning is, because emotions are data, actually. And I always tell my patients that there are no good or bad emotions. Emotions are just data, and the key thing is for you to learn to understand and decode the data that your emotions are bringing you, right? So that you're not stuck by emotions. So yeah, and obviously our ability to recognize our emotions helps us to be able to recognize the emotions of other people, and consequently to be able to empathize appropriately. The third factor is around flexibility and the ability to cope with adverse life events and function in social roles. So, how resilient are you? What strategies do you have for navigating challenges and difficult events, life events? How adaptable and flexible are you? I think earlier on you spoke about transitions. Do you have skills to navigate transitions? Um, yeah. And then lastly, it's just to be harmonious, to be able to maintain harmonious relationship, a relationship between your mind and body. So those are the four key ingredients. And quite interestingly, all these four key ingredients actually are linked to emotional intelligence, especially factor number two, which is the ability to recognize, express, and modulate emotion. And you will see in the model that I'm going to share with you, we refer to this as emotional literacy. Right. Okay, so shall we then move on? But also, as you've already indicated, also that, mental health sort of exists along a continuum,
Yeah.
you could vary from acute illness, to just being functional and to full vitality. And obviously, depending on where you're sitting along the continuum, you may
Mm,
require the services of different professionals. So as you can see, when we are on the red side, if you could also take the
yes.
analogy of the battery, if you're
Mm-hmm.
on the acute side, the red side, that's
Yeah.
more, of requiring of clinical care, where you would involve your doctors, your psychiatrists, your psychologists, your traditional healers, perhaps, and maybe your nurses and therapists. But as you move more towards vitality, that's more of a non-clinical environment. There you could engage the services of counselors, coaches, your clergy in terms of, your church community, or whatever spiritual community that you belong to, and your educators. But more importantly, yourself as a resource, because most of the time we really underestimate our internal resources. So it becomes very important for us to have self knowledge, and also to know what skills you've got, what competencies you have that you can use to navigate different environments. Friends and family are also a huge resource, because ultimately we are wired for connection, and it is through connection that we heal, and that we maintain sort of healthy um, uh, mental health wellness. Right. So I'm now going to share an EQ model that I like to use. It's an EQ model. There's many out there in the market, but this one is from 6 Seconds, which is an organization that I work with. It's a global organization who has a vision of having 1 billion people practicing and doing emotional intelligence. So I'm one of the network leaders, and on a monthly, no, not monthly, on a quarterly basis, I run EQ cafes. I think some of you may have attended a workshop that I did maybe a month or two ago, where we're looking at empathy and conflicts. This quarter, we will be looking at leadership and empathy. I will make sure that I send the invite to you to everybody, and you can attend.
Please.
Right. So this model has got 3 parts to it, and I call them pursuits. The first pursuit is around is called Know Yourself, and which is the blue part. And the second pursuit is Choose Yourself, which is the red part. And the third pursuit is Give Yourself, which is the green part. So the blue part, Know Yourself, is really about just being self-aware. You know, what are my emotions? What is my emotional landscape? And then what are my patterns? You know, what are my triggers? What are my climas? You know, what makes me to behave in a particular way? So it's really around self-knowledge, just understanding your own self emotional landscape. And later on, you'll get to understand why that is so important. Then the second part, which is the red part, we call it Choose Yourself. And this is about being intentional. So as you might know or may not, uh, most of the time we operate on autopilot. So this part helps us to move out of autopilot and be much more intentional in our actions, right? And the last part, the green part, is about being purposeful, and really being clear about what do I truly want. So these are our 3, that's not a good slide, 3 pursuits. But in summary, the Know Yourself, the blue part, is the what. And this gives you, so it gives you the what, and it's about knowing yourself, knowing your strengths and your challenges, and then, you know, which helps you to navigate. And then the red part is about the how, and it shows you how to take action, how to influence yourself and other people, but also how to operationalize, you know, these concepts. And then the last part, which is the green parts, is the why. Like I said, this you know, helps you to be clear about what you're going for, about your goals, about your purpose. But also this, you know, tends, you know, when you're clear and you're focused on what you're going for, you tend to be much more energized. And you know, you move in, you know, in a particular direction, because you know, it's very important to have clarity around purpose. Right. So let's look at the full model. So there's 8 competencies in total. Like I've already mentioned, within the Know Yourself pursuit, there are 2 critical competencies. The first competency being emotional literacy, the second one being recognizing your patterns. And then as we move to the red area, Choose Yourself, there's 4 critical competencies there. The first one being consequential thinking, which is really about, you know, before you take action, consider the impact and the consequences of your choice, right? And then the next competency is navigating emotions. So like I said, it's important for us to decode the data, the information that our emotions are bringing. And then that helps us then to use those emotions as data to transform situations, but also to make choices. And that's so important because actually the simplest definition of emotional intelligence is being smart with your emotions, right? And if you want a formula, it's combining your thinking and your feelings in order to make effective decisions. It makes sense? Right. Are you still there? I'm not seeing anybody, so.
Yes, I'm still here. I just
Yes.
muted
Yeah.
myself for
Yeah,
noise.
so because your picture it disappeared, so I'm like, yo, am I?
Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Nice. Okay, as long as you're
Yes.
still there. Right. And then the two other competencies in the choose yourself pursuit, you've got two intrinsic motivation. This is about how are you driven? Are you driven internally by your own values and your own um, interests and your own goals, and or are you driven extrinsically by things that come from externally? And then the last one, and very important, is optimism. This is really about, to what extent do you trade on hope? To what extent, and this competence actually helps us to explore options instead of feeling stuck and feeling like we're at the dead end. Then the last part of our model is give yourself, and it's got two competencies, increased empathy and pursue noble goals. The increased empathy is very interesting. I think one of you referred to self-care. So sometimes when we think empathy, we only think empathy towards other people, but it's very important also to have empathy for ourselves, so that we also guard our wellness, but also we guard our boundaries, because sometimes part of what causes mental health issues are just our inability to manage boundaries and to set boundaries. Right. Any questions so far? Right. Okay, so
So
let's
any
look at.
questions?
All right, maybe let me just go through it and then people will ask questions at
Oh,
the end. So I'm going to rattle through this. So just in terms of, linking, how is emotional intelligence a resource for mental health, right? So as you can see that a wide range of the emotional intelligence skills have been found to improve well-being and mental health. And these include, and you'll see as I go through this, you'll see that they actually relate back to some of the competencies within our model, right? Within our so the first one is finding and following purpose. I know that some of you may still be young, probably in your teens or mid-20s or 30s. And you're like, yo, purpose at such an early age, I'm still, but it's something, it's something that's sort of evolves over time, and it becomes an iterative process to discover purpose. But I would encourage that you probably should start thinking about it. What am I here for? And for me, this became much more pronounced, in the last 2 years when, people were dying from COVID, and each time I wake up, and I'm still able to breathe, I would then ask myself, why am I still alive? Why, how am I still justified to take in oxygen and, and emit carbon dioxide when so many other people have passed, right? So, and then the next competency is exercising optimism. Like I said, this is about, being hopeful and being able to have a growth mindset. And then the third one is emotional literacy. Like I've already mentioned, this is the ability to recognize and name emotions. So, and I will tell, and we'll go into it a little bit more. And the fourth one is practicing empathy. Like I said, empathy for others, but also empathy towards oneself. And the last one, but very importantly, is cultivating strong relationships. Because the thing is, we are wired for connections, for connection as people, but also, we deliver, through networks. You'll see that, as OCC was talking initially, we see it's very important to leverage your networks, and as you get into the workplace, you'll see also, sometimes, yes, you may be an individual contributor, but as you move up the talent pipeline, you begin to have to deliver through relationships. Right. Studies have shown that strong social relationships have been found to increase both mental and physical resilience, including just general satisfaction, physical health, and longevity. Right. So let's look at why emotional intelligence is so successful. So one of the things that I do in my company, I like Marelie, we also, offer psychometric assessments for various purposes. And sometimes when a client will come to me and say, I'm on a tight budget, which battery do you suggest I do, So most of the time I'll say, you can drop them all, but just make sure that you look at emotional intelligence, right? So what's the relationship between emotional intelligence and success? So studies have shown that emotional intelligence links to four critical outcomes or success factors, and those are, the first one is effectiveness, which is really the capacity to generate positive results, the ability to influence, but also the ability to make effective decisions. Then the second one is relationships, which is the capacity to build and maintain strong interpersonal connections. Like I said, this impacts our ability to get things done. And there's two factors within relationships. The first one is building networks, and the second one is being part of community. Belonging to networks, belonging to a cell group, belonging to professional bodies, right? And then the third success factor is quality of life. And this is really about the capacity to create true happiness from a life well lived. How was your well-being, but also how balanced is your life. And the last factor, so is well-being. I see the our metaphor, which is the battery again. It's really the capacity to maintain optimal energy and functioning. So those are our success factors. So emotional intelligence impacts on those outcomes. So within six seconds, we do, I think it's annually or every 2 years, we conduct a study and we look at the correlation between emotional intelligence and success factors. And as you can see that there is a correlation, very strong correlation between emotional intelligence and success, both at the workplace and just in life generally. Right. I'm going to skip this because I've already spoken about it. So overall, so I just want to link the various competencies to the success factors. So as you can tell, optimism links to effectiveness, right? Increased empathy links to relationships, and engaging motivation links to quality of life, and lastly, increased empathy again links to well-being. Right. So this is just a general overview of how the various competencies link to the outcomes. So let's look at noble goals as a resource, right? So like I said, noble goals is really, and purpose is really about connecting to something bigger than yourself. And normally this is outside you, and it's long term, and it's connected to other people. So the question is, what is your noble goal? Because this is the thing that gets you out of bed, when the going gets tough, or when you sometimes you feel so demotivated and not so energetic, right? So what is your noble goal? And it's a question that I'm asking. And because it's important to start thinking about it, because this is the thing that will get you out of bed, but also this is the thing that connects you to other people. And sometimes it can, for those of you who are still in the job market, or who are still trying to figure out their careers, it's important to think about, how do I want to impact the world? How do I want the world to be as a result of me having lived? What's the mark that I want to leave? Right. So the benefits really are that, having a strong sense of purpose links to mental health, and also physical health. But also it just links to, better well-being in terms of better sleep, protection against heart disease, prevention from Alzheimer's, but also it also interestingly reduces the risk of dying, you know, right. And lastly, like I said, the benefit is better relationships and higher quality of life, and just greater, life satisfaction. Right. So the next resource that I want us to look at is EQ is emotional enhanced emotional literacy. So remember, we said this is just our ability. Oh no, sorry. This is optimism. So and this is interesting, because optimism is linked to, it leads to growth, sort of linked to a growth mindset. And there's a scientist, Carol Dweck, she's done a lot of work around growth mindsets. Yeah? And this is not just about positive thinking, but it's really the ability to trade on hope, but also it helps you to explore options so that you don't feel stuck, right? So when people exercise optimism, they tend to shift, from a reactive stance to a more proactive point of view, and look at possibilities. And also, like I said, it links to a growth mindset. And those of you who are students of psychology, they know about Seligman, who's done a lot of studies on optimism, and how optimism actually improves, prognosis and the health outcomes of people that are sick. People that are more optimistic, they tend to do better, and their recovery rate is much higher. Right? Right. A tool that I'd like to share with you is what I call optimism bridges. Sometimes, and there's 3 of them. Sometimes people that are pessimistic, they tend to work on the left side of the slide. Sometimes they tend to see the situation that they're facing as permanent. They see it as pervasive, and they see themselves as powerless. But I'd like to encourage you that whenever you're in a situation, for you to ask yourself a question, because remember that our thoughts are not always true, right? So you must always check and verify. So ask yourself, how long will this problem last? And you may find that actually it won't last forever. It's not permanent. It's actually temporary. I'm just temporarily unemployed, or I just temporarily don't have an employee number, and then and then the next question, instead of thinking of this situation as pervasive, which is everywhere, ask yourself a question: how widespread is this problem? And you may find that it's actually isolated. I'm still okay. Some other aspects of my life are going fine. It's actually, just one area that I need to fix, right? And the last part, instead of seeing, ask yourself a question: how much of my effort can make a difference? So you may find that actually with some effort, you may have different outcomes. So overall, I would like the model is you move from triple P to tie, right? So you're moving from seeing the situation as permanent, pervasive, and powerless to seeing it as temporary, isolated, and that with some effort, the outcomes. Right. And I think this is the last part one, which is emotional literacy, very important. So this is our ability to, it gives us the language to talk about emotions and to be able to label the emotions. Um, and it helps us to figure out emotions, to understand emotions, but to decode emotions, but also because we carry emotions at body level, at cellular level, to locate. Sometimes you may not be able to give it a name, but if you do a body scan, you can be able to locate the sensation at body level, and then you can later on try and label it. And this helps us to communicate emotions, but also to understand, like I said, and decode the messages that the emotions bring. So in terms of, I don't think there's time to show this video, so I'm gonna skip it. But this is a very important tool, and I will share the link to it. Sorry, my slide is not very clear, but this is a very critical tool. So on your Google, you could find it there, Google Pluchik Wheel of Emotions, and and go to the 6 seconds website. In there, you'll find this model, and it's an interactive live model. So you'll find that when you click on any emotion, it will open up on the side, and it tells you the synonyms for that emotion. It tells you the sensation, but it tells you what message is bringing, but also a bit of coaching to say, what can you do? So remember, we said emotions are data. And this is a resource that I find that my clients really, really love. So, and this, also will help you to navigate emotions, to use emotions as a resource instead of catching emotions and then feeling stuck, right? Right. The last one is increased empathy. And there are actually 3 parts to empathy, which are, feelings, which thinking and actions. Right. So there's 3 parts, to empathy. And also, we just don't have time to go deeper into it. It's very important to differentiate between empathy and sympathy, because they're very distinct, and sometimes we confuse the two. Right. So in terms of cognitive empathy, this is really about I put myself in your shoes. And then emotive empathy is I feel with you and I take perspective with you. Right. And lastly, the latter part is action. So, I always say that with empathy, you implement the platinum rule, which is treating others as they would want to be treated, not how you think they should be treated, right? Which is a bit more difficult, because that's why sometimes you think you've helped somebody and they're not appreciating. It's like, well, why are they not appreciating? It's probably because you didn't help them the way they wanted to be helped, right? Right. So those are the 3 areas around empathy. But also remember that with empathy, exercise empathy towards yourself as well. I know that there's a big joke that goes around about us psychologists. You guys say that. We always say that the first thing you must do is to forgive yourself. And it's true. Because most of the time we're very harsh on ourselves, and yeah, so just a bit of self-care and self-forgiveness goes a long way. So last, as a sort of a parting shot, and I have said to my cousin over there, that I am open to running a more full-scale workshop with you guys on well-being and burnout. But, part of managing well-being is really, and burnout, is knowing your scales, being aware of what it is that drains you, but also what is it that supports you. Actually, this is a digital scale. When we do the workshops, and I will teach you how we can use the scale, just so that we're much more aware of things that give us energy, and things that tend to drain us. So, a question that I have for you is, what step are you going to take as a result of having attended today's cafe or today's webinar? You've received a lot of words of wisdom from Marelie and my other colleague. Sorry, I forgot your name. Buikanya, yes. So what are you gonna do? Because remember that everything is in action. So take a little piece of paper and commit, maybe just what's your key takeaway from this session, and what is one action that you're going to take as a result of having attended this session. Thank you very much.